I'm sorry. Yes, I'm on a roll.
It honestly feels like a Friday.
Happy Monday.
Yeah, but yes, somebody told me it was Monday. I go, where it is? The weekends just roll right in it.
They do, they do.
Thank you.
Okay.
So sorry, guys.
No worries, glad you're
We just went
here.
live.
So we're live.
Yes, we just went with it.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is the Climate Action Plan Committee meeting for Monday, December 15th. It's about 1:10 p.m. Sorry for the late start. We needed to make sure we had a quorum here. I am Mickey Varney. I'm the chair of the Climate Action Plan Committee, and the other members here are
Counselor Nishioka stepping in for Paul Tigan as alternate.
Shane Matthews.
thank you, and thank you for stepping in. And staff who are here, please just go around and introduce yourselves.
Julie Hanson, Transportation Planning Manager in the Public Works Department.
Eunice Kim, Long Range Planning Manager, Community Planning and Development.
Juliana Douglas, Climate Action Plan Manager in Public Works.
Robert Chandler, Assistant Director of Public Works.
Brian Martin, Public Works Director.
Well, thank you all for making time out of your busy holiday schedules to be here today. I don't believe we have anybody signed up for public comment. The next item on our agenda is approval of the October 20th, 2025 meeting minutes.
I move to approve the October 20th, 2025 meeting minutes.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, the meeting minutes are approved. All right, let's start into our agenda items here. Thank you for putting the PowerPoint together, Juliana. Okay, the next item is the C40 Local Leaders Forum. Yay.
Look at that handsome group.
Yes, yes. Well, Juliana and I attended the C40 Local Leaders Forum. And it was November 3rd through 5th. And I wanted to mention it was in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. First time I've ever been to Brazil, and it was such a great experience. First of all, the C40 is really where it's a membership group where local leaders come together from the US and actually from the world. And they talk about what they've done. And the purpose of us getting together for this was to develop a collective voice to then be taken to the COP30, the climate negotiations, which happened in Belém immediately after this meeting. Some of the takeaways and the purpose of it is we were taking the US story to Brazil and sharing what we're doing here in our local areas, our cities and states. And to me, wow, there was just this building of momentum, excitement. It was almost like you have a broken down car in a parking lot and you can't move it with just one whatever. You start getting more and more and all these actions and things that other cities are doing, and it just starts going like it's going downhill. And so that was the excitement there as part of it. Some of the things that other areas are doing, I just wanted to give you an example, are even smaller cities like Helena, Montana, the capital. I mean, they have a renewable energy loan program where they give out, they have zero interest loans that they give to folks who want to do solar projects, et cetera. And the loans are paid back on property bills over the next 12 years. And so there are in Arizona where they experienced 218-degree days last summer. They were talking about the tree plantings, the shade structures, the things they're doing to reduce the impacts of heat on members in their community and what they're doing. In Athens, Ohio, the mayor is, the past president of the League of Cities, Steve Patterson. He talked about the carbon sinks, planting trees, And even things like city code amendments to make it easier to install solar. I mean, even just simple things like that truly make a difference. I was really impressed by both Boise and New York mayors that were putting together mayors' climate youth councils, where they provided funds and got youth 15 to 24 together to work on projects and partnerships with climate action activities. And then at the end of the C40, there was an announcement that Bloomberg Philanthropies is established a youth climate action fund to help local cities, to help 100 cities actually help fund some of the projects with youth. So I'm looking forward to getting learning more about that. The C40 was also an opportunity to showcase what the city of Salem is doing. I talked about our cogeneration plant at Willow Lake, what we're doing with building decarbonization through our municipal energy master plan. I talked about our public works building and the microgrid, things that we're doing with that. I also stressed how it was important to be resilient to the impacts of climate change and some of the things we're doing, for instance, with our ozone facility up at Guerin Island, the wells shallow wells we're putting now in response to the potential drawdown of Detroit Reservoir, but how that will help in the future in terms of resiliency. So I felt a lot of pride being able to share a lot of the things that Salem's doing here and just picking up on the different things that they're doing all over the place. And then lastly, I wanted to mention, just trying to think here, what else was I going to say here? Well, yeah, it was an opportunity to share the best practices and then bring those lessons home, bring policy ideas home to talk about, bring to this committee and just share. So it was just a great time. I really enjoyed it. And so thank you for the support to go. And yeah, go ahead.
I also appreciate all of the support that I had to be Councilor Varney's staff delegate. So that was an incredible opportunity, and Councilor Varney did a fantastic job at representing the city and being able to speak to other elected officials on the work that we're doing. And it was incredibly just cool to be there and to get to learn from leaders internationally and locally as well. So a few things that I had to take away. The local representation was just about all that the United States had for that delegation. And so we all had this pressure, and it was really nice to see other communities, other countries having a sense of like community in, oh, we are still working with the United States. So that was very cool to be a part of. One of the other main things is that successful climate action centers on local context. So you can't just have plug and play programs. You have to really center them on what you need in your community and what your community is willing to accept. There is technology and knowledge that wasn't ever available before that's available now. And so we have the pathways towards meeting our goals. My note on this is that a lot of the grant opportunities will ask you to be innovative and new. And that's really difficult when you're trying to implement strategies that will work. And so there's kind of like an interesting dynamic between you want to have a program that works and that you know that you can spend this much money and get this much success, but then the funders are like, I want something new and exciting that other communities can model after. And it's like, well, if they can't get funding to model to implement this model, then it's kind of a weird thing there. So I thought that was funny. And then another big item is that we are experiencing the impacts of climate hazards now. And so a lot of the work being done is to mitigate those climate hazards currently and in the future. Every bit of work that is done will help reduce the frequency and severity of climate hazards going forward. And we are already experiencing these. And so there being more pressure on doing things that will reduce the human impact. And then there's a lot of interest in regional and even global collaboration. So if we have opportunities, there are networks where we can work with others. And then my biggest takeaway was kind of reframing the issues. So I wanted to take a moment to say that climate action is still going to be climate action, even if we talk about it in other ways. And I think it can be even more successful climate action if we talk about it a little bit differently. So for instance, instead of transportation emission reductions, it could be about public health and economic development. So I stole a couple quotes that I thought were really exemplary. And we are losing people from crashes and having insufficient public transit programs. Someone else said, you can stop smoking, but you can't stop breathing. Talking about the public health impacts of having relied on single occupancy vehicle for transportation. For building decarbonization, I'm talking about it as improving resiliency and reducing current costs. So cities bear the costs of rebuilding after natural disasters. So what is that cost of inaction? And so when you reduce the amount of energy that you use, you have that savings now. But if you make resilient investments, you reduce costs down more. And nature-based climate solutions being economic development and improving livability and public health. So improving open air markets and conditions through tree planting and shade structures. So they were talking about improving their economic development, but they were also talking about improving lives for, this was in Freetown, Sierra Leone, mostly for women who worked in those markets. And so it was a equity question, it was a public health impact, and it was improving their economic development. So there are ways that we can do climate action that is beneficial for our community, where we talk about it as the other benefits.
Exactly.
I think that we're on to our next one. If you
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad that you mentioned that although the US has withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement, the US was not absent at this conference. It was a very, very strong voice.
The US was the second most represented group other than those from Brazil. So
I have a question. Well, first off, thank you for both going and bringing back that information. It would be interesting to find out how, like Helena was able to fund the grants. Because it always comes down to money.
Right.
And I believe, Eunice, did I send you that article from 50 states about the heat pumps, how Nebraska, did I send it to you?
you sent it to me and Kristen Rutherford
Yes.
and Salem Housing Authority.
And so I found this website, or I found a link to it. It says 50 states and what each are doing. And I thought this one was really interesting. They're talking about when an apartment, like an aging out apartment, is struggling with, creating opportunities so they could keep their units affordable. There was grant money that was made available for heat pumps, individual heat pumps. And by taking that grant, the owners of the apartments had to then make sure that they were in the affordable range for a certain number of years.
Okay.
So I thought,
Okay.
wow, just that concept, if somebody was even building new or refurbishing, might there be opportunities where grant money could be there to help them put in energy efficient units so that then it would reduce their costs and then be able to continue providing the lower rent. So I just thought, oh, that was pretty clever if we could find a way. So, and I can share this with
Good idea.
others if they want. I do have a question though. I know there's always the concern about concrete and whether or not it's energy efficient, not energy efficient. Some concretes are supposedly getting improved. Was there any talk about that at that event? I'm just wondering about discussion
No.
of concrete.
Most communities do sector-based emissions inventory, not consumption-based emissions inventories. So it's one of those things that if it's not counted, people aren't talking about it as much. So there was some discussion on like the costs and the environmental impacts of rebuilding after natural disasters.
Yes, I saw.
So that would have been part of that,
Okay.
but they weren't explicitly talking about the consumption-based items.
Okay. Low carbon concrete or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then if I can just circle back, there are there are grants available, probably available through the state. They're anticipated to drop in spring of 2026. They're called Homes and Here grants, and those would be available for people to improve their home's energy efficiency and or to electrify. So going from gas to power to electric power
Okay.
for heating and water heating and things like that. So there are some options.
It might be like what this Nebraska is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The federal government did a clawback earlier, but it seems like they will stand. So anticipating again in spring of next year, and I'll let people know as that develops a little bit more.
Okay.
Great.
That's
Thank you.
really great news. Any other questions?
Do you know, so I was just trying to do some research here on the solar aspect, and so do you know on like an average solar panel system that would be put on a residential house, like when is the break even point for most of those? Like I was doing some research and it looked like some of these say about 14 years or so is when you kind of hit your break even point for the upfront cost versus the, not necessarily the or the environmental cost, but the actual financial cost that you save. Does that sound about right?
I would say it's probably getting closer to 8 years in our current costs of energy. Of course, that as prices of energy goes up, that repayment kind of closes in because you would have been paying more for energy. I think that it also depends on what incentives you're getting. So if you can get incentives upfront, then that reduces as well. I think 8 to 10 is probably a little bit more accurate.
Do you know if there's any programs out there where, so like, let's assume for a second that a new home's being built, right? We can't really do anything, we shouldn't do anything that increases the cost at this point, right? Because housing costs, I think most of us would agree, are already sort of at a high level. But if we know there's a financial incentive to having solar panels put on new construction, and particularly, is there a program out there where there's an offsetting thing? So let's say that we put together a grant program that fronted the cost of the solar panels. Could we get paid back the difference in the actual financial savings that the person would have been seeing with let's say PGE? So let's say their electric bill is $100 instead of $150 because they have the solar panels on, but their payment should still be $150. So we collect the extra $50 to get paid back for the solar panels until those are paid back. Kind of like this long-term grant program that didn't have an actual financial cost to them or the builder up front. Is that some other communities have done?
I don't know if there's any on the residential side, but you did just describe an energy savings performance contract. And that's actually in the municipal energy master plan. So I love that you were already thinking of how to do that. But I don't think that there are any that I know of that have that type of program, but that's certainly something that we can look into.
On individual homes.
On residential, yes.
And that certainly is true. I know that when I moved into my home that I've been in now 25 years, it was suggested to look at solar for water heating. And so we had people come out, and it was going to cost a great deal of money because the limited solar availability, on one little section of my roof, then having to go way to the other side and provide it. We were told it would take probably 80 years or longer to get paid back for what it would cost. And it was just like, wow, okay. So to your point, it's really hard to do that if it's it's like, okay, it's gonna take me 80 years to get,
Right.
like, I'm gonna have to live here for a really long time. But, so finding ways like maybe individual homes or new construction, because a lot of times people will do something environmentally friendly, get a heat pump or put in solar panels. It's to reduce the cost that they're paying, so they see it, but it does take time
For sure.
for that payback. And, but new construction might be a way to see it, because then it's, unless you can get some sort of discount off of, your mortgage, but, that's not gonna happen.
Well, and that's why I was wondering if there's a way that, if there's a grant program out there that fronts the cost,
Mhm.
so that the builder doesn't increase their.
Yeah.
Their costs, so, essentially, so that it's not passed on to the consumer, right? But that grant program, whether it be us or a different grant program, get paid back by the difference in energy savings over the course of the lifetime. So even if it was 15 years, ultimately, the municipality or the grant writer is getting all of that money back. It's just over time.
There are upfront grants that aren't ever paid back,
Right.
but it's not in the way that you, I think that you talked about it kind of in like more of a rebate type of situation, like how it would.
Yeah, but it's basically like a loan. You're
Yeah.
essentially giving a loan on the project, but the no interest loan that doesn't actually increase the cost of the home, because ultimately it's not, there's no cost to the actual builder or to the consumer upfront. I don't know if it's even possible. I don't know, maybe it wouldn't pencil, but I was just sitting here looking at it, and I was looking at the comparison of like what the Energy Trust of Oregon rebates look like versus what the installation cost looks like, and they aren't equal to each other, right? You still end up with a pretty good amount of cost to your, somewhere around $14,000 is kind of the estimate here of what's still left over to put these on. And so if we had to increase every home by $14,000, that's not I don't think that's the right move up front. But if there was a way to like not increase the cost, but over time get paid back, or, that there may be an option.
Eunice, isn't that the apartment complexes or the multiplexes that are now getting some grant funding for seismic.
Pace.
So that's kind of the program that's happening, where, that was recently came to us, where an apartment building, it had to be multi-unit, could get, a grant to help, or a loan that would then, be slowly paid back to seismically help hold the building together.
Gotcha.
So it might fall into something like that, because I went, wow, that's pretty clever, but it wasn't for single family homes. It was for.
Right.
Multifamily.
There is a RPACE, or the Residential Property Assessed Clean Energy, that has to be passed by the state. Oregon has not passed that, so we only have the ability to implement CPACE in our state. That's something that other jurisdictions have implemented on a residential scale as well.
So we have work to do.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yes.
questions and answers.
Thank you for the discussion.
All right, and then moving on to the Municipal Energy Master Plan, there was a presentation earlier on in the year. This is basically the chapters of our report. And we've gone over the introduction and methodology. So today I'm going to be discussing some of the funding, baselining, opportunities to reduce consumption, scenario-based analysis, and opportunities to increase resiliency, but I will go super quick. So
Even the introduction was super quick, so I have.
so for funding, we have three kind of buckets of where funding can come from. The first is financing alternatives. So the first one on there is energy savings performance contracting, which Councilor Matthews did an excellent job of giving an overview for, even though he didn't know. He's like,
Unknowingly.
paid actor here. And then, so that's when you basically pay for energy efficiencies through reduced consumption over time. And you get that through private financing. They're normally very secure loans. And the reason why that is a different thing than a regular loan is you have verified performance. And so you go through something called an ESCO, or an Energy Savings Contracting Organization, and they verify the savings. And so if you don't get the performance that you've been guaranteed, they pay for the difference. So it's very secure.
Yeah.
But it also means that you get those savings, and
Okay.
then some. So that's a really great option if we need to do that. Green revolving fund is basically that, but internally. So you would front the money and then you would pay it to your own self back in a special bucket. And then from those, you would be able to do more projects. And so you basically set aside, this is how much money we're going to put into our green revolving fund. We're going to do these different upgrades. They're going to pay us back over time. Some communities have done it for electric vehicles. Some communities have done it for capital improvement projects. And you just need to have your own vetted performance tracker. So then you can kind of tell how much energy savings is coming from the upgrades that you made, and then make sure that those accounts are paying back the green revolving fund.
Okay.
Bonds, that's kind of the traditional way, but it is still a funding. And then CPACE, it's not for government entities. However, not all buildings that we occupy are government owned. So that is a specific case for if a building that we are occupying, for instance, the 911 call center, if they were to use CPACE, there could be energy savings for us.
Remind the acronym CPACE.
Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy. And then federal opportunities. So I was very specific on not calling them grants. And we'll get into that in a second. But the first one is the IRA, or the Inflation Reduction Act clean energy tax credits. A majority of them are sunsetting this year. Several of them are continuing on, namely solar, wind, geothermal, or sorry, not solar, solar, wind are being sunset, geothermal, battery storage, and hydro power. So those are ones that are continuing on. We can still benefit from those, and that's about a 30% rebate, and that's through a direct pay mechanism. So we would pay a tax return. We would file a tax return, and we would get paid back for that.
Okay, so you pay for it, file it, and then get a refund, basically.
Yes, of 30 to 50%.
Okay.
And then there is Department of Energy grants, and that's a federal one. We have different ones depending on the year. A couple of those Grid Resilient and Innovation Partnerships, or GRIP, and the other one, because federal government loves their acronyms, the other one is BRIC, or Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities. So GRIP or BRIC grants. And then we have incentives, rebates, and technical assistance. Energy Trust of Oregon has been a phenomenal partner, providing all sorts of those to us. So continuing to partner with them. Utility incentive programs. And this is for when we are outside of Energy Trust of Oregon territory, so specifically in Salem Electric. And then Oregon Department of Energy grants. So we've been a recipient of several of these, $2 million grants and one $100,000 grants, all for the community renewable energy grants. And one of them helped with the solar on this building and the microgrid. And then we have state energy programs and technical assistance. So state energy program is through the Department of Energy, that they provide technical assistance for programs like their Energy Star Better Buildings platform.
I have a question. Are any of these funding opportunities available for businesses?
Energy Trust of Oregon, utility incentive programs, and then Department of Energy, the Better Buildings platform is also available. Again, that's more technical assistance, less funding. IRA tax credits, those are also available to businesses and individuals as well. Again, with the sunsetting stipulations.
So I'm going to ask, and maybe Eunice may know. So when urban planning is helping a business with the development, are they informed of these kind of opportunities so that we could provide that information so that they could then look at the cost And again, I would encourage any building, even if it's multiplex, like, are you aware of these opportunities so that they could potentially reduce their costs up front? And, I'm sure that some, if they're, doing it all the time, probably become aware, but it might be helpful to help people know. So, thank you.
That's great.
I'm so glad I'm here today.
And then I won't get into any of the big details on baseline conditions. We went to do the energy assessments at a lot of our different buildings, and it's difficult to assess our baseline conditions considering that we have the extremes of this brand new public works building, and then we have an 1887 children's museum. So the baselining was a difficult endeavor. All right, so opportunities to reduce energy. They've navigated this into 3 phases. Phase 1 would be the kind of easy wins, if you will, ones that we could get done in the first 1 to 3 years. And that would be LED retrofits, control optimizations, plug load managements, and solar and critical storage sites for battery storage. To this, I actually want to give a quick public thanks to our Director Martin, because he noticed that one of our buildings wasn't on the right schedule for its automated controls. And so because of that, we've got that fixed. And so our holidays should be on the correct schedule from now on. So really thankful to have that kind of buy-in to our program so people can let us know when there are issues. But that would be a bit of the phase 1. Phase 2 would be a little bit more beneficial, but also expensive. That's looking at HVAC modernization, heat pumps, and VRF, which is variable refrigeration flow. It's basically heat pumps that can be piggybacked through multiple zones to do heat pump technology in large facilities.
Oh, wow.
Very cool. It is now a standard technology, but it has to be highly engineered. So it's something to be aware of that you need to be asking for, looking for, designing for.
Okay.
Envelope improvements. So that's all of the ceiling, the insulation, things like that. Building automation system light. So that is upgrading buildings to have automated controls, targeted solar and storage expansions, and high priorities operations. And then the phase 3 is portfolio scale electrification and renewable energy integration. So that would be more prevalent PV solar canopies on rooftops and parking facilities, and battery and storage microgrid readiness. So it's not necessarily building the microgrid, it's getting enough interties that you could partner with someone to build a microgrid. And then the estimated reductions are there. So this would get us very much so on our way to net zero.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are these compounding numbers? So like the 7 to 10 is added into the 18 to 22, or that individual phase 2 would save 18 to 22, and the individual phase 1 would save 7 to 10?
So individual phase 1 would save 7 to 10. I did read this over in the report, but now I want to be very sure, so I will get back to you on that one.
Okay.
Okay, I was thinking the same thing. Is it just cumulative
Right.
or is it? Okay.
Those are details in the report. And I will also be sharing the report once it's finalized.
Sure.
Thanks. And then the different specific measures, I wanted to go ahead and parse those out. And these are percentage of the specific energy poll that they are currently taking. It's just more details. You have this in your email if you want to go over it a little bit more. I don't think there's anything super high end on that. Scenario-based analysis. This one, they basically wanted to show what those upgrades would be for meeting our goals. So it shows kind of where we'd be at. So from here, it doesn't look like they are cumulative. It does look like they are cumulative. Sorry, I said that wrong. It does look like the last graph was cumulative.
Could you go back to the previous
Yeah.
one? I was just looking at the estimated savings. I think that's pretty important. Okay.
Well, and so on this, do we have that projected cost as well? So like the LED lighting upgrades, 75,000 a year in savings, great, but it's a $2 million project, you're not getting paid back for 24 years or something like that. And so like, do we have a projection on how much it would cost? So you can kind of see how much, when we actually hit that break even point financially with it.
I asked for brackets. They couldn't give us like a definite cost, but I asked for brackets of those costs, and those would be in the final report. Those are.
Okay. Gotcha.
You try to jump ahead.
No. I
No,
know
I
I
said
when I was
you-
reading group two, so.
I was just teasing him, but.
And then opportunities to increase resiliency. So anything that we can do to reduce the amount that's pulled on the regular load will increase our community-wide resiliency. And that's a really important thing that I want to hone in on here. So things that we can reduce the regular pull from the grid to operate our different buildings, HVAC, lighting, communications, computers, those are the ones that we want to have be as efficient as possible. Some other things is if we're looking at getting these on their own infrastructure, so having PV or having battery backups, they would help with increasing our resiliency for our operations as well. And then we also can consider EV charging and kitchen equipment and shelters for part of that to be more accessible during prolonged outages. And then normally when we're looking at having resilient energy generation or storage, we want to look at what we would need for that to be able to operate for 36 to 72 hours of regular use. And so that's normally what you consider a resilient building is something that can operate on its own for 1.5 to 3 days. And this is a photo of, I think, the 2021 ice storm.
Looks familiar.
Any questions on this?
Still thinking about the kitchen equipment shelters and wondering what CERT does, what they say. Anyway, just thinking about options for when we don't have access to certain things.
Yeah, and that one was more of just like to be considered because we have a Pringle Creek Community Center, which has like a kitchen. And so that could be a consideration for having some resilient energy resources because it in a disaster, it could operate and help with
As a shelter.
As a shelter. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
maybe less as a shelter and more of like as a point of operation.
There you go.
Sure.
Point of
People, yeah.
operation, yeah, someplace
Yeah.
to out there.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
that
makes
was
sense.
why that was in there.
Okay.
Yeah, it might not be standing, but the kitchen might still.
It might be flooded, but it might still.
That would be true.
So that one probably wouldn't be like top
The best
priority for
example.
investments.
Any questions?
I saw a hand up back here.
Yeah, I'm John Livingston, just citizen, but going underground with PGE's lines, you know, or in the Willamette Valley down, the tree issue is as an observer, the number one reason why we lose our power. Now, I'm sure equipment failure is also, you know, or you know, when transformers blow up like that, but I don't know if PGE ever has any vision of going underground, which they always, you know, all the utilities say, oh, it costs too much to go underground, but it seems like power outages in our whole, you know, northwestern Oregon here are mostly caused by trees coming down, so but I don't know that PGE has ever. They're just cutting the limbs all the time and then they grow back and they cut some more limbs, and so I don't know if they would ever go underground.
They are looking at going underground where it's fiscally responsible to, so normally if they're building new lines, they're underground. There are a lot of costs to that as well, and then there's also concerns of like, if you don't see it and there's an issue, what could that end up resulting in? So yes, they are looking at it, they're looking at it strategically as, and it's normally as new lines are needing to be built, so less so for retrofitting, but
Thank
and
you.
it's also a strategy in the climate action plan, so.
Sure, sure. Well, and it makes more sense. I mean, you start thinking about what it costs to repair above ground lines and get people back online versus underground, you know, comparing those costs. I remember when we were on the Cable Regulatory Commission, the things now that for fiber optics and other cables and stuff, 8 feet deep trenching things that would do a narrow trench, and I don't know if they can use something like that for electricity, no idea, but there's some technology there. It'd be nice to see us get away from having overhead power lines. I agree. Thank you.
Would also be helpful to find out when it's not working right underground, where it is, because it would be awfully expensive to keep digging it up.
They could probably figure that.
Sounds like there's some opportunities coming.
Okay, wow, well, thank you. That was a very in-depth.
And then, before we move on, I don't think I need to vote on this or anything, but if I could just get a temperature check. So regarding CPACE, we were gonna talk about it at this meeting. They weren't quite ready for that, so they, are pushing, their presentation both to city council and to the CAP committee back. They're going to city council on January 26th. This year, just based on schedules, we went for the even months, for the CAP committee meetings. I'm curious if you want to continue with the even months, if you'd like to change it to the odd months, or if there would be interest in adding in an extra meeting in January if you wanted to continue with the even months to have that CPACE meeting here prior to it going to council, or if you are fine with it going to council first and then getting more details and having them come here after. So there's a lot of options, so I just kind of want to know what the temperature check is and see what people would like.
Well, since I'm alternate, I probably will not weigh in on that decision. I'll let the two that are here. My only thought is, it sounds like even if they want, even if everyone chooses to go even months, that Juliana needs to have a meeting in January to prep for the meeting.
That's still up for you all. If you would like to have CPACE be presented to this committee before going to full council.
I'll let you guys talk about it.
What do you think? Is it would mean adding a meeting?
I'm good either way. I mean, if whether we hear it first or we hear it on the 26th of January, it's not gonna change the information, I would assume, right? And so I'm not.
Have a little bit more chance to talk about it. I don't know how much flexibility they have in the program design at that point.
Council, yeah, gotcha.
Is there, I mean, is this something that we would talk about and maybe recommend changes or something to council? Because that's the only way I can
Right.
think of that
Of it mattering.
that
yeah.
it would really matter.
Or help answer the questions because you heard it first to the council. It might be that you would be able
I guess
to provide a little
that's
bit more
good.
information.
That's true. I mean, I have seen that before in other committee things where the committee is able to answer some of the questions at least.
Or at least we have the opportunity.
I'm good for either one. Over to you. I'll leave it on you.
Remember. I mean, I'm open to having a meeting
Sure.
in January, even if it's a shorter meeting, just to go over
Yep, that's
what
what
that, so that we can answer questions. If you're okay with
That way
that.
you don't have
I'm
to
good with that.
change all of the mechanism that you have for your meetings. I think
Yeah.
that would be,
Yeah.
like, have one extra meeting.
All right, I will
Does that
send
work?
out some
Okay.
scheduling stuff shortly. Thank you all for your input in that discussion.
It's for all your prep work.
Appreciate that. Okay, next on our agenda is Salem in Motion updates.
All right, Julie. And Eunice, that's right.
It's
Handing you the
exciting to get
keyboard.
moving forward on this, right?
Well, it sounds so active and fun. Salem.
Everybody, get up. Now is our time to do the stretch.
Stretch.
Okay, so y'all know who I am, and Eunice is here. I'm also supporting this project. We are sort of working on it together because land use and transportation go together. So Salem in Motion is the name of the project, multi-year project that we are doing to update the city's transportation system plan. I brought a copy of the plan here for my visual. And also to implement state rules that were called the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities Rules. They were adopted in 2022. So the state's rules aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation, increase housing choices, and create more equitable outcomes for Oregonians. So that's one reason we're doing the project, is to address those rules. The other reason is our Salem project, you all might remember, updated the city's comprehensive policies plan in 2022. And the climate action plan also was coming forth at that time. And both of those recognize the need and desire to update the city's transportation system plan. So all of those things come together to lead to this project. And you'll note down there in blue by the climate action plan that is the strategy in the climate action plan relating to updating the transportation system plan. So phase one of Salem in Motion is the regional scenario plan. This is something that we have been working on jointly with our regional partners, particularly Salem, Kaiser, Marion County, and Chariots. The Oregon Department of Transportation has also been instrumental in this. They provided the funding for it and the technical resources to lead this effort. We had an advisory committee of officials from the 3 jurisdictions and Chariots to help guide the project. Councilor Varney and Councilor Tigan were both on that, along with Mayor Hoy. So the state's rules came out of state goals that had been previously set to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. And the state rules included a target specifically for each of the metropolitan areas, including us. And that target is shown here. It's measured against a 2005 base. Now, the thing that I want to point out here is that when we talk frequently about greenhouse gas reduction target, but the state rules actually translate that into a vehicle miles traveled per capita reduction. So they are saying that Salem Kaiser, we need to reduce our vehicle miles traveled per capita by 30% over that 2005 starting point to 2050, regardless of the kind of vehicle that is being driven. And it is also focused on light transportation. It's focused on people in their household trips, not on commercial or freight or anything like that. So it is different from the city's goal to be carbon neutral by 2050 because we're measuring things in different ways. They're both going in the same direction. I just want to be clear. Sometimes I accidentally fall into the 30% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, but it's really a 30% reduction in vehicle miles traveled per capita. So we can still grow number of people and, Okay, so first thing that the consultant team looked at is what would happen if we continued with business as usual based on our currently adopted plans and policies. And this was referred to as the reference scenario. The reference scenario showed that we would have a 10% reduction in that per capita vehicle miles traveled by 2050. 10% does not equal the 30% requirement from the state. So we then went out to the community and got input on what transportation and land use changes we should be considering in order to achieve this target. And so the types of levers that we were talking about and we heard support for were increasing transit, increasing active transportation, paid parking. I'd say we got sort of mixed reviews on that one. increasing mixed use areas so people can have shorter trips in order to, meet their daily needs. And then other options in terms of encouraging people to use alternate modes. With that input, the consultant team worked through the complex model and with input from the advisory committee to come up with a preferred scenario that relies on these different policy areas that you see written here. This preferred scenario then results in an approximate 32% reduction in the vehicle miles traveled per capita, therefore meeting the requirement. Had some other thought, I forgot what it was. Okay, well, we'll come back to it. Oh, I remember now. So the advisory committee saw this back in March of 2025 and advanced this as the preferred scenario.
Sorry, that's me.
So from there, the next step was performance measures. So the state says, okay, you got your preferred scenario. How are you, Salem and Kaiser and Marion County, going to measure your progress and report on your progress to achieving this preferred scenario? And so we needed to develop performance measures that aligned with each of those policy areas. But because of the way that model works, it wasn't like we can just say, it's not a one-to-one comparison, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. So we came up with performance measures and you pass those out.
So these are on the last 2 pages of your agenda, if you have those, but there's also.
Thank you.
So the performance measures that were developed focus on the different things that you see up here on the list, a bunch of transit ones, both related to transit service, but also to some of the programs that transit offers through their trip options or transportation options program, working to, promote other modes of transportation. The 4 categories at the bottom are the ones that Salem is going to have the most control over. So the parking, active transportation, land use, and lane miles. There's a lot more detail on these tables here. I will say that, so each jurisdiction has a target, but it's unique to that jurisdiction. I think it's in here, yeah. And some are regional. So the transit performance measures are regional and will be reported on a regional basis. The parking, Salem is the only jurisdiction that has a parking performance measure, and congratulations, we've already met it. Because the base year for this work was 2021, the action that the city took to implement paid parking on street downtown this past summer met that 2050 target. The active transportation, there are different targets for each of the 3 jurisdictions. For Salem, Kaiser, the target is to implement our bicycle network that's in our current TSP and also construct a lot of sidewalks. So it's essentially a little bit more than doubling our bicycle and pedestrian network. Land use, we also have measures that focus on making sure that we have transit access for housing, or that we put housing where transit access exists. So it sort of works together. And then lane miles is we're all the regions working together. And the idea there is that we're not going to add a whole lot of lane miles between now and 2050. The amount that we're going to add is the same that we already have in our current reference scenarios.
So Julie, these performance measures align loosely with the levers that are used to feed the model.
Yes, that's why
And
they're
the
those
performance
levers.
measures are then incorporated ideally in some manner in a transportation system plan to align with the statewide goals for carbon reduction using transportation, vehicle miles traveled as a surrogate.
Yes, pretty good. They also align with the climate action plan strategies that you see noted in blue there, and I'm sure you all have them all memorized. And I'll be getting a little bit more to your point here in a second, though. So our next steps on that transportation phase one regional scenario plan is to go to council and get council approval to submit the regional scenario plan. I have it printed out over here. It's available on our webpage. The actual approval of that plan is through the Department of Land Conservation and Development. So once council says, yes, okay, we can submit it, we will get that approval. There is an appeal process that would go to the Land Conservation and Development Commission if it is appealed. And then once we have approval, that launches us really into phase two of the transportation Salem in Motion project. Yes.
So is every city has to basically meet the same standard of the 30% reduction in miles traveled?
The 30% reduction in vehicle miles traveled is applied to our region. And it's not really measurable in the sense that the performance measures are actually what's going to be used to track our progress.
Okay.
So if we meet our performance measures, but our vehicle miles traveled doesn't quite meet the target, that's fine.
Okay.
We're held to the performance measures.
Part of the reason I'm asking is because I'm just looking at like our percentage of bike and pedestrian network and our percentage of pedestrian networks in underserved neighborhoods. And so in both scenarios, we're more than doubling our current baseline value to our target value. But the other municipalities that we're kind of getting billed with as a region aren't necessarily doing the same. And so it seems like we're taking on a larger percentage of the burden. Like Kaiser's going from 12 miles to 13 miles. We're going from 24 miles to 52 miles in the same scenario. And so how were these determined on who was going to take on the biggest burden of these scenarios? And like, since we're all graded regionally.
A lot of it has to do with what our gaps are, so, for example, with the pedestrian network in underserved neighborhoods, we're only focusing there on the higher order streets. So to me, what that says is that Kaiser has more streets that already have pedestrian networks maybe than we do. So we have maybe bigger gaps than they do.
Because to me, what it says is Salem's going to spend a lot of money to get bike and pedestrian network up and pedestrian networks in underserved neighborhoods up.
One thing I want to
And I
point
want
out
better.
is that these performance targets are not binding. So they are, let's see, how do you put it?
Aspirational.
They're aspirational. They are a reach purposefully
Okay.
because we really need to make, what do you call it? Bold action to meet our climate outcomes. Now, it's also not financially constrained. So I recognize that, when we do our TSP, our transportation system plan, we are likely not going to be able to fully achieve all of these targets. And that's okay.
I would also think that Salem is much larger than Kaiser, so there's not necessarily an accurate, like 13 miles in Kaiser might be a percentage of the distance of Kaiser, and 52 miles is a percentage of Salem, so
Right.
it may be closer than what it seems, but with those numbers.
Maybe. I'm still looking at we're more than 100% increasing ours and they're less than 10% increasing theirs. And so I assume that
That there's,
quite equal.
that there's inequity already.
Yeah, so, but like I said, it really isn't about, we're not we will not have a TSP that gets us to these.
Yeah.
I mean, in our current financial reality, and part of it is then acknowledging that.
And the state's gonna be okay with it, I guess.
Yes.
Only because they're basically, right, this is not super uncommon, unfunded mandates.
Correct.
But they're not, since they are making us track it and report back on it, there's gonna be no penalties when we don't hit it.
The way it's written in the rule is that we have to report on these measures every 4 to 5 years. And at the time, we have to say, are we meeting the interim target or not? And if we're not, we have to say, why not? And, you know, lack of money would be one reason. And then we need to propose a corrective action. Our corrective action could be, we need to find more money. And then, you know, when we go back another 4 or 5 years later, we basically say either we found more money or we didn't find more money. And part of the impetus for this rulemaking was to be able to demonstrate the financial need in order to achieve these outcomes so that we could then, you know, hopefully seek and get more money from the state and from the feds to, you know, advance our priorities.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that was one of the other advantages of having an aspirational goal in an adopted plan that we can document that we're falling short is justification for application for applying for more grants.
funding.
One of the funding sources, say, in our plan, we have the shortfall, here's an opportunity to contribute, to help us do it.
Right, whereas Kaiser, you know, if they say they only need one more mile, you know, sorry, they're not gonna get the money.
I'm curious as to when projects actually create a road diet. How does that affect some of this? Or does it?
Yeah, on the lane miles, that would be a credit for us. So say, I think right now in the lane miles, we say that there's how many miles? Let's see. 21 arterial lane miles, you know, between now and 2050 to add. So let's say we reduce an arterial lane
Right.
mile, then that becomes, instead of 21, maybe there's, how does that work? I'm trying to do the math. Basically, we create more capacity for adding more lane miles. Now, we don't necessarily have that many lane miles in our region, that arterial lane miles that we're going to have the financial resource to add or the need. And, you know, this does not include things like turn lanes or safety improvements. This is more, you know, a full scale. The most obvious example to me is Cord and Kubler, where, you know, right now, likely we're gonna want additional lane miles on Kubler. And that would be part of this
Okay.
number.
I was just thinking, how does that, when it is improving pedestrian safety or improving overall reduced accidents, how it might play into it? I was
Yes.
just kind of
It's
asking.
really focused on really fully capacity increasing projects.
Okay, thank you.
I have to run to an offsite meeting, so.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll do something this
Yeah.
afternoon.
Okay, so phase two, so really we have to get through phase one in order to fully launch into phase two. And this is partly because those performance measures then feed into the development of our transportation system plan. And so we will use those, we'll adopt the performance measures there and also use them to guide our priorities. We will likely not fully meet it because the TSP is going to be a financially constrained document. So I don't anticipate that we will be able to have that many bike ped facilities added, but it is something we need to consider. We can't just ignore it. So anyway, but even though we haven't fully launched into this phase two, we have been working on it. We have been working with the Department of Transportation on a multimodal inventory. They just delivered us the primary dump of data last week, one missing part, but this is an effort to try to make sure we have all the information we need to meet the state's rules. They paid for this. It's their way of trying not to be an unfunded mandate, even though it is an unfunded mandate, but they're trying. We also developed a historic equity context report that will form the basis for a lot of our analysis in the TSP as well as in other planning projects. And we are working with the Department of Transportation and the consultant team to develop and finalize a scope of work. The state is providing a significant amount of funding for this, but there will be city match. So before it's finalized, we will have to come to City Council for approval for an intergovernmental agreement. I don't know what that amount is at this point because we're still finalizing it. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be integrating those performance measures into phase two. We have a web page Salem in Motion. Down at the bottom, there is a place where you can sign up for on an email list. That's our planning email list. So it's not just updates on this project, but also on general land use planning projects that we have. We work collaboratively with Eunice on. So that is all I have. Did I answer your questions from previously?
I think so. I got last question, it's still on the sheet, but obviously it seems like regionally, we're all kind of depending in this report for Chariots to have a large expansion too. I know that's somewhat questionable at this moment. And so same thing, we won't be penalized if that ends up having to be part of our strategy that changes in our report out.
Right. I mean, I will, I would say I expect Chariots to maybe use this to say, hey, cities and counties, we need your support because you're relying on us for this. But yeah, there's not a real penalty box. I think at the way end, it says that I think the main penalty would be if we choose not to comply and don't comply at all with anything, they could tell funding partners that we are not complying with state requirements, which would then put a jeopardy, like if we were going after a federal grant for transportation, if they came on record and said you're not complying with state requirements, that might jeopardize that. But it's we'd have to be pretty blatant in not complying.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, I had a couple of questions.
Uh-huh.
So for all of this, Salem in Motion, all the work that you've been doing, which city fund is it coming out of?
So my time comes out of the transportation fund, which is Fund 155. The Salem in Motion, the regional scenario plan work, all of that is being paid for fully by the Department of Transportation. So there's been no city involvement in that. We have in the budget some funds in the transportation system development charge category. We have those set aside to help us with the update of the transportation master plan. Those would be our source for matching the ODOT funds and potentially doing any elements that ODOT does not include in their funding package. ODOT is looking to the city, which would be me and Eunice and Hayden, to take a key role in the community engagement on this process. So, our faces will be the ones out there, and that would be, covered by, but for us, by the transportation fund, and by Eunice by general fund for long range planning.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking about, the potential for ODOT not having funds because
This
That
is
was-
federal funds of ODOT. They're not funds that they
Okay.
can use for operations and maintenance. So if you've heard ODOT talk about their funding crisis, they sort of have two buckets of money, right? The money they can use, the state money they can use for operation and maintenance, unless the legislature has tied it to a project. And then they have federal funds that cannot be used for operations and maintenance. So this comes out of federal funds now, it's not like they are gonna give us everything, but I don't think it's not on the same limitations as all their other funding problems.
Well, I think, for instance, the gas tax, the state gas tax provides what, 3/4 of the funding for our transportation fund?
For us, yes.
Yeah,
our
for
transportation,
us. And so
yes.
if we're paying for some of this out of that, it would
Just
impact,
paying
right?
for my time, which
Okay.
is
Okay,
already budgeted in, it just means I'm not doing other things.
okay.
Okay,
Okay, that's just what I was asking, which buckets it kind of comes out of, to try to have an idea moving forward, so we're not just
Yeah.
stuck
I
in
mean,
the sand.
So, like ODOT is trying, and the Department of Land Conservation and Development are trying to provide resources and support to lessen the unfunded mandate ness of this. But it's not total. I mean, they did provide us some funding for our support on the regional scenario plan that went back into the general fund. We had a agreement with them. They paid us 25,000, 50,000,
Maybe 40,000
40,000
for our time.
for our time. And so,
Okay.
they're trying, but
Any additional questions from anyone?
and I appreciate you guys being. Oh, yeah, we're anticipating going to council in January, either the 12th or the 26th. Last I heard was it was leaning towards the 26th.
26, correct.
Okay,
And that's because the council meeting on the 12th is busy already. It's loaded.
yes, so, and we anticipate doing a presentation, a brief presentation, and we will also have representatives from ODOT and DLCD there with us in case there's questions on the sort of state front.
Well, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you for all the work. I remember the big wheel, the motion.
Great wheel.
I did,
It was awesome.
It is.
these are just some short handouts that I bring when I go out to various community engagement to let people know that we are starting on the update to the transportation system plan. And really, this is just trying to like plant in their mind that you can go to this webpage, and you can sign up for this email list.
Okay. Will you send this to us electronically so I can, or will it already go out with information to neighborhood associations and things?
I mean, I've given it to so many neighborhood associations already. I feel like I might want to wait until we have a
Perfect, then,
sort
never
of the
mind.
next step.
I'll
to
ask
launch.
Shiny.
Okay.
And if there's like a time that she's doing things, I can also coordinate that with like your regular cap updates, so you aren't getting a million emails as much as possible.
Ask the question. So it says things, it says like, we've heard from many in the community, we want your input, basically. It doesn't really say how, like, there's a sign up to receive our emails, but like, where does someone actually give their input?
Well, and that's part of the reason that we're sort of in the, we're in this weird space right now where we don't have a specific ask right now.
Gotcha.
So, yeah,
Gotcha. Okay.
yeah. Call Eunice. Call your city
Yeah.
councilor. Okay.
They do that all.
Let's do less. Awesome.
Well, is there any other business, anything members chat about?
There is public interested in.
No, I didn't have an official comment or anything, but I heard the other day in California that their climate transportation system, the ask, and I'm not sure if it's by 2050 or 2040, is to reduce the amount of driving by 25%. The amount of driving that every person does by 25%. And I'm sure that supposedly will reduce air pollution and meet a bunch of California's climate. So you gotta imagine people in LA being asked to drive 25% less. And so I was curious, you said it was so many percent per capita. Now, isn't per capita counting the kids and the babies and everybody?
Yep.
That's per capita.
Mhm.
So your goals that you put up there, was that 40%? 30% by 50. So I don't know how you count the miles when there's 3 kids in the car and, I'm trying to get my head around what behavior would it take to achieve that metric?
Well, I think the base that we're starting with is per capita. So you have the same base in terms of like, there might be a car that's driving with 5 people in it. So then, you're using that same base in 2050, so whatever.
I would guess it's a statistical analysis, average number of people in a family, for example, average number of people in a commuting car, residential. I mean, it's all statistics with a certain amount of variability and
Right.
variances. That's
The-
engineering, not a-
Because it's not really calculable.
Well,
It's estimable, but not precision.
yes, and we do rely a lot on our partners at the region, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, that may develop and maintain our travel demand models, which is, where we get a lot of this information. And they do household surveys that are sample size based, that they do every, maybe 10 to 15 years. So it's not something that they look at all the time. So that's why those performance measures are sort of important, because they're a little bit more concrete and things that are a little bit more in our control. Now, if we, increase our bicycle pedestrian infrastructure, if we double it, does that mean we're gonna have that many people using it, that many more people using it? I mean, there's research that ties these things together, but there's no guarantees that in Salem, Oregon, if you go from, 100 to 200, whatever facilities, you will have this increase. So yeah, it's estimation.
Thank you.
Good question.
Okay, I wanted to ask about, because we were talking about the next meeting, I believe our next meeting, then we're gonna try to have one in January, correct?
Yeah.
And then if we're staying on the regular even month schedule, our regular meeting would be in February. That makes sense? Okay.
And I'll send out the scheduling polls later to make sure that I'm trying to capture as many people as possible.
Great.
Well, thank you all for your input. This has been lots of information.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So it's is it the third?
Third Monday is what we currently have on schedule.
Okay.
I was gonna send, just a lot can happen in a year. In that poll, I'm just gonna ask a couple dates and see if this time still works, or if it would work, if a different time day would work better for folks. That way,
Because I haven't added any of the 2026 dates yet, so. I
yeah,
just
so
wanted-
all of that'll be coming soon.
Okay. Well, if there is anything else, I'm gonna adjourn the meeting. All right. Thank you. It's adjourned. Thank you all for participating.
Yeah.
Wow.